Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for a session on managing finances with a chronic disease. I'm Mindy Buchanan, Director of Patient Programs, the moderator for this session. Before we start, I want to go through some housekeeping items. As a reminder that the session is being recorded, attendees will be muted during the presentation. Questions will be addressed throughout the presentation, so please do drop them into the chat or the Q&A function at your bottom right side of your screen. All questions submitted via the question tabs can be upvoted. So if you see a question you also have or one that you'd like to be answered, come across a thread, you can click on the thumbs up to move the question up. All questions submitted can be viewed by all attendees. Please try to be as broad as possible when asking your questions. We know how unique your situations are, but it's important to note that our experts are not able to provide direct, specific advice. We're honored to have with us today Martin Schenkman. Mr. Schenkman is a world-renowned expert in financial and estate planning for those impacted by the complex chronic illness. Mr. Schenkman has over 20 years of estate planning experience and has published over 1,200 articles related to financial well-being and chronic disease, as well as a book entitled Estate Planning for People with a Chronic Condition or Disability. Welcome, Martin.
Welcome to the program. We're going to talk about estate and financial planning, specifically for those living with sarcoidosis or with a loved one with sarcoidosis. Much of what we're going to talk about is going to be, we could use the word basic, but I think really essential, critical, important, maybe better descriptive terms, because it's things that everybody needs to do, however wealthy, however poor, however young, however old. These are going to be things you all need to do. And what we're going to try to do in our conversation for about the next 40 minutes or so is emphasize some of the nuances of how you tailor planning to address the fact that you have sarcoidosis. So anyone with a health issue, anybody with unique family circumstances, and not even unique, whatever is your situation, the planning you do has to be tailored to reflect who you are. Nothing should be canned. And sarcoidosis, just like the level of wealth that you have, your career path and where you are in it, and what sarcoidosis may do to your future career, it's all relevant. And that's really a key take home. Now, the other piece is that what I'm going to try very hard to do is to give you actionable steps. And after many of the different topics, there's going to be a checklist, which we won't cover. It's beyond what we can do in the time that we have. But the whole point here is to empower and educate you so you can go out and take action. Listening to this program and doing nothing to help yourself, I've accomplished nothing. My goal is to empower you, motivate you, and guide you to get in place planning steps that will help protect you or your loved one, or both. And by the way, on the disclaimer, I know I'm a lawyer, so I have to have a disclaimer, but very important point. Tax and legal rules change all the time. So whatever the law is today, it may be different tomorrow. You have to be mindful of that. Also, there's many significant differences from one state to another state. So I have to speak generically. So be sure to check your state laws, and we're going to talk about that and how practically you can address some of that issues. Now, what is financial and estate planning? Key point, it's what it means to you. It's what it means to you. It's not what it means to me. It's not what it means to some author or TV show. It's what it means for you. It has to be tailored to reflect your situation. And again, our goal, act now. I want to give you actionable, practical steps for you and your loved ones so that you can start doing things now. My personal view, if you decide to do everything in this PowerPoint immediately, you'll fizzle out in a week or two or a month. If you take on bite-sized chunks, for example, I will spend 2-3 hours every weekend until I'm done with all the steps I need to take. That's manageable. I'll spend 3 weekends a month, 2 hours each time, and I'm going to address some of this, or 1 evening a week for an hour. That's the way to tackle this. Next, you have to factor in your health situation. Whatever your experience is with sarcoidosis or other health issues for that matter, or your loved ones, that needs to be addressed. And you need to address it now, not tomorrow, today. You have to start. Another very important point. Too often when people hear the word estate planning, they think a will, I'm going to die. That's not what we're talking about. Estate planning, properly defined, is planning for your life. It's to empower you to have the richest, not financially, but in a personal way, life, the most fulfilling life that you can, with the least amount of headaches from financial and legal issues. So it's planning for life. Look at this as a positive. Another point, it's got to be an integrated plan. You can't talk to your financial advisor, then keep that in a separate silo, and then go either get legal documents, whether you're talking to a lawyer or doing them online yourself, then next month, next year, talk to an insurance consultant. All of this needs to be coordinated. Coordinating what you do is the most important thing to making sure that your plan fits and makes sense. It's really important. And we're going to talk about how. And some of this, if you do get advisors to help you, if you want them to coordinate, you have to tell them to. If you have a financial advisor, talk to them about estate planning, talk to them about insurance planning, even if you have a separate lawyer and insurance consultant. You want to make sure things are coordinated. Holistic is the key word, holistic and integrated. Next, what is financial and estate planning if you're living with sarcoidosis? So it's really planning no different than anyone else does, with a tweak, with a modification. And the reason I say it's planning in a sense no different than everyone else, everybody's got something going on, whether it's a financial issue, a health issue, a marital issue, everybody's got something going on. Whatever planning anybody does has to be tailored to reflect their circumstances. If you or a loved one has sarcoidosis, you want to tailor or tweak, and I'm using the word tweak because it's sometimes just a very minor modification you're planning to address it, sometimes not so minor, but you want to make those changes. You don't want to take a standard step, and I'll talk about that again later because it's such an important point. So generally speaking, it's the same process for you as everyone else, tailored to your experience. And we're going to talk a little about it, but I'm sure you know better than I that each of us has different health issues. Each of us that has sarcoidosis, is living with sarcoidosis, experience may be different in terms of severity, longevity of the disease, impact on our lifestyle, where we are in our career. Those factors are really important, and you need to make sure it's tailored to you. And we'll talk about some of that. Please focus on life planning. This is about good stuff. This is about living the best life you can live. It's about early retirement if that's what's going to face you, caregiving costs if that's what's going to face you, addressing medical decisions, end-of-life decisions. If you're in a situation, and we're not going to talk about it because it varies very significantly state to state, but if you're in a situation where medical costs are going to be significant and your resources limited, you should talk to an elder law attorney, a Medicaid planning attorney in your state. Don't go to somebody else. It has to be in your state because the rules are very different from state to state. And by the way, I'm going to try to give you reasonable ways to get some of this work done that we're talking about less expensively if that's important for you. And I want to be realistic. On Medicaid planning, don't do this on your own. Think of those TV commercials, closed course professional driver. You have to hire an attorney in your state to do Medicaid planning. You can't do that on your own. Consider how you or your loved one's life may be impacted by sarcoidosis. And that's something you're going to communicate to advisors if you're using them. And if not, you're going to have to factor it into the planning that you do in each different segment of planning. Now, I had some more details on this, but I feel you're going to know better and you don't need me to spend time now going through the details. You have to explain to loved ones, and when I talk about if you're going to do documents online, you want a team to do it or a group to do it, you have to make sure that if everyone doesn't have sarcoidosis, they understand what your challenges are or may be, right? There could be some uncertainty and you may not know. You have to talk about various outcomes. You have to talk about how the disease may progress. You have to answer questions they may have to understand it. So example, you go to a financial planner, they put a financial plan together. If they're using stock answers as to life expectancy, work expectancy, how long you can work, when you may retire, you may get the worst and wrong results. You need to help them understand what your experience is and how it may affect your planning. And we're going to talk about some of that. So general planning implications of sarcoidosis. It's tough to plan because there's such a wide spectrum of symptoms. Some people in a year or two it may resolve. Other people may have struggles for 20, 30 years or longer. There's a lot of variability of the disease from one person to the next. Which organ may be impacted? If it's your lungs or something else, may affect the symptom complex that you have. It may affect your ability to work. So because there's not one standard answer, it's even harder for loved ones, people you name in your legal documents, and we're going to talk about that, to understand. You have to help everybody involved, advisors if you can afford and hire professional advisors, family, loved ones, people you name. You have to help them understand. Don't assume they understand. Even if it's a family member, don't assume they will understand. Now, this is just my comment, and you may disagree. But again, it's about you. As I said in the beginning, it's your plan, about you. I think until you really are confident that you have a handle on the disease course for you, you want to try to plan carefully for perhaps what might be the worst case scenario. You obviously want to hope for the best. You want to take care of yourself and try to live for the best. But I think you need to plan for the worst until you see otherwise. And I'll give you an example. When you're first diagnosed, you may not know the impact sarcoidosis will have on you. You may not know if it will affect at all your ability to work, and if so, when. If you have to take early retirement under the worst possible scenario until you know more facts, and in 5 years, as an example, or 3 years, you need to plan for that worst case scenario. If you may have to retire in 5 years, but you don't take any action because you're not sure yet whether that's going to come about, so you don't cut spending, you don't increase savings now, you could be too far behind the curve to ever make that up. So it's probably better, at least in my view, to plan for the worst when you're doing legal and financial planning. Obviously, stay optimistic and hope for the best, but plan for the worst because you don't want to lose valuable years when you can be getting things done. You want to get estate planning documents in place, and we're going to talk about all of those quickly. You don't want to wait until things get worse and it gets harder to do, or you need a document in place. So again, that's just something to think about and talk. And I guess the sign on page 7 sums up my view. Don't wait. Plan now. I'd rather be planning for a worst case scenario than what occurs than to defer or plan for what I hope to be the better case scenario and find I've made a mistake. I'd rather over plan than under plan. Obviously, there's some exceptions to that and you have to be mindful what you're doing, but I think those are good, reasonable, conservative guidelines. It's always top bullet point on slide 7. It's always easier to put off tough planning decisions. Nobody wants to think about writing a will. Nobody wants to think about writing a health proxy to give somebody authority to make medical decisions, but you need to do it. You want to do it soon. You know, hopefully things will turn out better than you imagine, but putting things off and not tackling those unpleasant tasks can be a terrible mistake. I think it's just human nature. Nobody wants to do something that's unpleasant. I'd much rather go to a ball game than talk about a will, but you need to do it. Until you know the severity of your disease course, it's best to plan for worst case scenarios and the risk of waiting and finding out that planning was no longer feasible or that you've lost opportunities. And we'll talk about some of those options. Now, before you begin, you want to line up advisors. Now, let me explain, and I'm going to give you a continuum. I'm going to start with what I'll call the gold standard of how to do this. Then I'm going to get practical because many of you may not be able to afford this, and I want to give you both standards. If you can afford what I'm going to suggest, it's the only way to fly. What is that? You want an attorney that does estate planning. You don't want to do it online on your own. You want a CPA to help you with tax planning for medical costs. You want a financial advisor or wealth advisor to give you a real financial plan that integrates the issues, and we're going to talk about some of them, that sarcoidosis may have on your financial situation. You want a real insurance consultant to evaluate all your insurance planning. And we're going to talk about that. That applies to probably everybody that's listening to this. That's the gold standard. I call that a team. Better than that, the platinum standard is where that team collaborates and works together. You ideally want a team that is collaborative and works together to accomplish all of your goals. You don't want people in separate silos not talking to each other because it's all interrelated. Your financial advisor has to know what your insurance consultant's doing because they can't do a proper financial forecast. Your CPA, if there's tax benefits that may lessen the tax burden on you, your financial advisor needs to know. Your attorney needs to understand not only your disease course, but whether or not you need to do planning or transfer assets, whether you're in a wealth strata where Medicaid planning makes sense or you have enough wealth where it doesn't. All this stuff is integrated. Please assume that no advisor understands what you're going through. Don't assume anybody understands. Even if they understand, even if you're paying for the time, take 10 or 15 or 20 minutes. It can't be that long, and talk to them. Now, before you talk to the advisors, make sure you've had a real open, honest conversation with your medical providers so you understand their best guess as to your disease course. And I think you also want to ask about, and I know it's not pleasant, the worst likely scenarios that you may face, because you want to plan for those. Now, many, in my experience, probably most advisors, attorneys, accountants, financial advisors, don't really have a great sensitivity or understanding of health issues and their impact on planning unless they themselves or a loved one has gone through it. Some have some experience. I don't think most do. You need to help explain it to them, and we're going to go through some of that in the program that we're doing today. Explain your specific symptoms, the impact of sarcoidosis, the anticipated disease course, and like I suggested, even though it may be unpleasant, the potential worst case scenario of what you may face. I would plan for the worst case scenario. Don't accept standard anything. Standard doesn't mean anything that works. Standard is just, what works for some hypothetical, mythical person that's standard. Doesn't work for you. You need to tweak your planning for your situation. What we're going to now do is go through planning in 12 steps. I've tried to break it out. Some are very short and simple. Some we're going to speed through because of time, but I want to give you the sequence of what you need to do and help give you guidance. Now, most of the steps that we're going to talk about, as I said earlier, there's an action step plan after each one that will give you more detail. We're not going to cover now, but those will help you. Step one, organize. You can't do any planning until you get your stuff organized. And I mean everything. You want to have medical information. I like to have all my medical records available. I have everything on my laptop. I take my laptop to my doctor. Somebody can't find a record. I have everything in date order by category, and I can almost instantly bring it up. Emergency contact information. Set up an emergency contact list. God forbid something happens, a loved one, a family, a friend, a neighbor needs to know who to call. You want specific financial information, so if somebody has to step in as your agent, we'll explain that when we get to it. You want to have account numbers, names, addresses. You want key information that someone needs. Passwords. We all live online, even if you try to avoid it. Much of our lives is online. How is someone going to access and find passwords to help you? You got to make sure you address that. Do an inventory of all your estate planning documents if you have any. Will, health proxy, power of attorney, whatever you have, put it all together and get it organized. Legal documents, a deed for your house, get everything organized. Nowadays, with scanners being so inexpensive, laptops being so inexpensive, cloud-based storage so inexpensive, everybody should have everything organized on a laptop, password protected or encrypted, and backed up to the cloud. You need financial data. You can't make decisions in a void. You can't expect any wealth advisor to do a forecast for you without having financial and budget information. You have to look at how you own different assets because that's something that's going to change. And one of the recommendations or suggestions is we're going to encourage you to consider transferring non-retirement assets to a revocable trust. It's a better tool in many cases to managing assets. Joint accounts, you have to be careful. And that's why if you can afford a lawyer, it's good to go through all of this because I'm covering a lot quickly, but there is a lot to cover. And I want to give you a big picture of all of this. So if you have a child that's going to help take care of you or manage your money, if you have a difficult stretch that you're going through. If you put your accounts in joint name with that person, let's say you have 2 kids, when you die, the kid helping you is going to get the joint account. It passes to them on your death. Is that what you want? Very inexpensive, no cost actually, way to help protect yourselves financially. Have duplicate copies of monthly statements sent to somebody. And ideally, I'd make it not the person who's helping you with finances, so you have a check and balance. Simplify and consolidate. If you have accounts in more than one institution, ask why. If you have more than one account, ask why. You got to have your IRA and your Roth IRA and your regular checking account. Those have to be different. But unless there's a legal or tax reason to have separate accounts, try to have the least number of accounts in the least number of institutions. It makes it safer for you. It's easier to keep track of. When you're struggling with any kind of health issue, you don't want to have more complexity and issues to deal with. Access to a safe deposit box who can get in. I like having everything possible paid online. It eliminates paperwork. If you get everything on auto pay and auto deposit, if you're hospitalized for a period of time or just not feeling well, you don't have to stress over paying a bill or making a deposit. It's all on autopilot. Get everything on autopilot as you can. Some of the specifics to sarcoidosis, you gotta talk to your financial advisor. You want a budget put together and a financial plan, especially if your work or career, your job may be limited, you may have to retire at say age 50 instead of age 65. You want to make things work, you've got to have a budget and financial forecast. You've got to look at what you have to do to tighten the belt on expenses and other things. You also have to look at what realistically your out-of-pocket costs for medical care may be. One of the estimates from FSR is that it's $4,000 to $10,000 every few months for medication. Some people with more aggressive forms of sarcoidosis could spend $100,000 a year. You need to know what that means. If you're spending that kind of money, unless you're very wealthy, you've got to talk to a Medicaid planning attorney. Now, sarcoidosis tends to impact those in sort of an age bracket of 30 to 50. That means a lot. Some diseases tend to affect people at younger ages. So for example, multiple sclerosis, the average age of diagnosis is 35, younger. In the 30s to 50s, you may already have bought a disability policy, you may have some savings, you may have retirement plans at work. You may have what to plan for, and you want to plan to preserve and protect that to help yourself for the duration. So it's really important to take an inventory of what you have and look at the impact that your health issues may have. How long do you think you can realistically work? Talk to your physician. You know, again, if your work career is going to be cut short, rein in expenses now, ramp up savings, reevaluate your asset allocation, talk to your wealth advisor about that. If you take those steps at age 50, knowing that you only have 5 years to work instead of 15, you may well do very fine. It may not be quite the lifestyle you wanted, but you can really help yourself. You don't want to leave these things go. We're going to skip the checklist. Now, a quick word about legal documents. If you have the financial wherewithal, it's always better to get an attorney to prepare legal documents than doing it on your own. I know there's lots of resources online. I think if you can afford an attorney, you should. Even better, if you can afford a specialist who specializes in estate planning, even better still, even if it's a little more expensive. Now, I want to be realistic. Not everybody can afford that. If you can't afford it and you're going to do documents online, let me tell you the 2 steps that I think are really important, really important. And I wish the online legal services would make people do this. First, you're not a lawyer, you're not going to understand this stuff. Also, one of the advantages I have as an attorney, I can be objective. I can't be objective about me, but I can be objective about you. If you don't have an attorney, have a group of friends do the planning together. Get 3 people that also need documents. Do it as a team. Why? Because your friends can be objective about decisions that you're making and give you independent input. 3 or 4 people will help understand better what decisions are being made than one person alone. You have people to question you. That's step 1. Step 2, get some training and education before you do anything. My biggest gripe about the online services, they should make you, let's say you're going to do a power of attorney, which is the next document we're going to come to. If they made you listen to a 60-minute video about powers of attorney and what the different decisions mean and different suggestions for different types of people before you did the form, I think they'd get much better results. But they're in the business of selling documents. They don't want to make a hurdle or a barrier to you paying for the document. But you really need to do it. If you do it as a group, maybe each of you independently finds videos on the document you're going to do or articles and then brings it to the group and you all share it. It's worth investing the time. So if you do those two things, I think you'll get a much better result of online documents. And again, you know, maybe there's somewhere in between where you hire an attorney for some steps, not others, depending on your resources. But I want to be realistic and tell you how to address these things. In all the above cases, make sure you tailor situations to your sarcoidosis experience. Now, power of attorney. Power of attorney is a legal document in which you designate a person called an agent to make legal, tax, and financial decisions when you cannot do so. When if your disease progresses. Now, most powers of attorney are effective immediately. A lot of people like what's called a springing power, where it only becomes effective when you're disabled. The idea is, gee, why should I let my kid sign on my checking account? I'm fine now. Only if I'm disabled, then they can sign, because that's only when I need them. If you can't trust them when you're well, you can't trust them when you're disabled. But that springing mechanism creates a lot of complexity. How do you prove you're disabled? Are you going to be able to get a doctor to give a note saying you're disabled and now someone else can control your finances? So think very carefully about making it effective immediately. It must be durable. It's a crazy legal concept and it's sort of anachronistic, because the whole point of a power of attorney is to help you when you are disabled. But in order to do that, the document probably has to say, and the state laws differ, something to the effect of this power of attorney shall remain valid even if I'm later disabled or during my subsequent disability. You need the magic language under your state law. And I think the online services should do it. Certainly a lawyer will be familiar with that. But you want a durable power. You want to name an agent and successors. You may want to name co-agents. Think about it. The issue with co-agents, you got two people, so you have checks and balances. That's safer. But two people to get both together to make a decision could be harder. So think about it. Now, we could spend the whole, 50 minutes talking about just powers of attorney or any of these legal documents, but I wanted to give you an overview. Everybody needs a power of attorney. Think through some of the things and see, by the way, how things fit together. Where I talked in the first section about organizing, if you don't simplify and consolidate and make passwords and other information available, an agent's not going to be able to do their job. Now let's go to another category. I'm going to call this broadly healthcare documents, but it's 3 or 4 documents. A living will, which is a statement of healthcare wishes, a healthcare proxy, which is like a medical power of attorney. You name someone to make decisions. A HIPAA release, Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, if you want to know, where you authorize someone to have access to medical records because medical personnel can't share private health information, PHI, without that. And in some instances, if you're in a terminal situation, it could be a POLST, physician order for life-sustaining treatment. So you really need multiple documents. I'm sorry that it's complicated. I didn't make it that way, but you want to do what's necessary to get it right. So the first is a healthcare proxy where you authorize someone to make medical decisions. Keep in mind, one of the things you may want, given some of what's going on in our country, is to authorize the agent to change your domicile and move you to another state. If you have religious concerns, make those known. Too often people ignore that and it can become very problematic. Some specific things for sarcoidosis. Communicate whether you want experimental or off-label drug use. I think you probably do, because some of the treatments are off-label. Does your agent understand what your situation, your healthcare health status is? If they don't understand it, maybe you should talk to them. Maybe after talking to them, you can decide whether or not they really have the sensitivity to deal with helping you through your health issues. Again, religious beliefs should be addressed. You may want to address end-of-life decisions. That's often what these documents are thought of about, but it's much more than that. If you're going in for surgery, somebody may need to be there to make decisions. Now, living will we talked about. Make sure you indicate personal preferences of things you want, religious issues, pain relief, all those different types of decisions. Now, let's jump to another area. If you have a young child, you have children, right? Average age of diagnosis is 30 to 50. You may have young children. You have to make sure that they're provided for. Standard legal documents often don't address enough for children. A standard power of attorney, which we talked about, where you name an agent to make financial matters, you want to make sure you specify if you're helping even an adult child, right? Financially, with college costs, with home care costs, home costs, you want to specify that those should be continued. Otherwise, the agent won't have legal authority to help a third party, even an adult child. So you need to take care of your children and anyone else, and I'm just using children. It could be family members that you're caring for, both financially and otherwise. And here's a checklist on some of the other things to think about. A will. Everyone knows what a will is. You name an executor. You have minor children, you name a guardian. Couple points about wills. I mean, there's nothing unique about your experience with sarcoidosis other than if it's difficult for you to manage or the things on your own for yourself and you're taking all these steps to plan your finances, maybe you should tell family members not to name you as an executor or a trustee. You want to make sure you opt for a flexible approach whenever possible, because if your disease progresses and it's harder to change things, you want to make sure what you have. You may suggest to other family members that if they leave you or bequeath you money, like a parent, aunt and uncle, if they're going to bequeath money to you, that it be in a trust. And if you're going to do Medicaid planning, you want to make sure it's to the Medicaid trust that your attorney created for you. So it takes a little bit of coordination. Really important. Somebody makes an outright bequest to you, your parent, of $500,000, and it comes outright to you and you're on Medicaid, you may be disqualified. It could be, instead of helpful, just a waste. So you need to coordinate that. Now, I think next document is a revocable trust, a little more complicated. Now, you might think the power of attorney for financial matters is sufficient to let somebody take care of financial matters for you, and it is. But a revocable trust, you create a trust now. You can be the sole trustee or a co-trustee, depending on your condition. You can name successor trustees. If you don't have a safety net of family members you can really trust, you can name a bank or trust company as successors. You can name co-trustees, easier under Rev Trust. So there's a lot of steps you can take using a revocable trust to protect the integrity of your finances and get help. So let's say you're fine managing your own affairs, but you're going to need help periodically when you're not feeling well. Maybe what you do is you name a co-trustee and empower you or the co-trustee, either one, to take ministerial actions without the co-trustee signing. So bill paying can be done by either of you, but yet you have that help, but you remain in control, but you have the help. It's a nice balance. Revocable trust, you can assign a separate tax ID number, which may be helpful to protecting you from financial abuse if someone's trying to take advantage of some of your infirmities. You can name a function called a trust protector, and you're going to really need a lawyer to do that. But the trust protector is someone that can hire and fire trustees. It's a good check and balance on trustees in case somebody tries to abuse you. Item 7, make sure you tailor your documents to what your circumstances are. I know I've repeated that, but too often people get standard stuff and it doesn't reflect them. Review insurance, not just life insurance, all insurance, property and casualty insurance. If you're going to have a home health aide living in your home, make sure your insurance covers it. Make sure if you have long-term care coverage, you review the policy to see what it provides you. If you don't have long-term care coverage, you may want to look into it. Now, it's going to be more costly or difficult to get, perhaps because of your diagnosis. But if your disease seems to remit in a year or two, and you get an opportunity to buy coverage, maybe you should really consider it. Disability coverage, review what you have. If your work career is going to be cut short and you have disability coverage, whether a private policy or through work, what are the requirements? You may have reporting requirements. You don't want to miss those and jeopardize your coverage. Get somebody to help you review the policies. They're often quite complicated. It could be your insurance agent, it could be your wealth advisor. It may be your attorney, but you want to make sure that you review all the coverage you have. Life insurance, if you have a term insurance policy and you've just received a diagnosis, maybe you want to convert it to a permanent policy so you can keep the coverage forever. Lots of different things that need to be addressed. And again, I'm giving you sort of this mile-high overview, trying to help you realize what you really need to do to properly plan is a broad array of steps. And here's a checklist for some insurance. Now, beneficiary designations, many people think a will is their primary document to dispose of assets when they pass, but beneficiary designations on life insurance accounts, IRAs, and things like that could be the most important. Nothing unique for sarcoidosis, but again, to complete the overall planning. Now, step 10, and this is my personal very strong belief, and this is why I'm speaking to you today. Anytime a charity contacts me, especially charities about health issues, I want to help. My wife was diagnosed 16 years ago now with multiple sclerosis, and I feel helping educate others that face similar health issues is something that gives me a positive experience and makes me feel like I'm contributing. I feel that if you can find ways to give back, it'll help give you not only a sense of purpose, but a deeper sense of gratitude for what you do have. There's always somebody that's worse off than us. So giving back is very empowering. I don't think you were expecting perhaps to hear that in a financial and estate planning speech, but you should. And how you give back it doesn't depend only on having a lot of money. You can give back by donating your time. You can give back by making a modest bequest to charities that have helped you. The FSR is an example. So think about it. I think it's very rewarding. Step 11 is almost always ignored. You don't want to ignore it, especially because people are not going to understand your experience with sarcoidosis unless they're really living with you intimately or they've experienced it themselves. You need to talk to people. If you have advisors, you have to talk to them. We started off by discussing how you need to explain to advisors about what sarcoidosis is, what your experience of it is, and how it affects you, and how it may affect you. You have to have honest discussions with family members. You have to tell them, that you may not have an inheritance because my funds may be used up on drug and other medical care costs. You may have to talk to them if you're doing Medicaid planning so they understand what it really means and what's happening. You need to have honest, open discussions with people if you're going to name them as an agent or a trustee or successor trustee, because otherwise they won't know what to do. Communication is absolutely vital. It's so often ignored. People feel they sign a document, they're done. It's not enough, and hopefully I've convinced you that. You got to organize your finances, you got to look at your insurance, you got to look at all the array of documents. You have to communicate. And the final point, review and revise your planning. Nothing is, I signed a document, I'm done. I did a financial plan, I'm done. Everything in the world changes. Every year or so, review what you have, revisit it, especially your financial plan, especially if you're making changes, especially as the progression of your disease or the evolution of your disease, if that's a more accurate term, becomes better known. You want to revise your planning so you can adjust accordingly. Review and revise. Way too many people think they do any of this stuff, whether it's an insurance review. I bought an insurance policy 20 years ago. Why do I have to look at it? You have to look at it. You have to look at all this stuff. Please review it. That's why I've made this one of the essential of the 12 steps. Obvious, nothing remains static. Tax and property laws change, family situations change, your assets and net worth change. Look at the stock market. Health changes, new medications may be developed. Everything changes. Review your plan. So the key point, you need to feel empowered. If you will tackle the 12 steps that we've talked about, do them a few hours here and there, but commit to do it on a regular basis. Take action at almost every step along the way. We've given you a checklist of action planning steps. If you go through this methodically over 6 months or a year at a time, you will find yourself in a dramatically better situation. Please don't defer planning. Please don't say, all right, I'll get to it, because the time that you lose could be irreplaceable. Example, let's say you can convert your life insurance policy from a term policy to a permanent policy, and you can afford to do that. It may be a phenomenally valuable step to make sure you have that protection. If you wait even a month, you may find that the term in the policy over which the time period over which you can make that election is now gone. The most common time I see, and I'm just using this to illustrate, people evaluate whether they can convert an insurance policy is after they've already missed the deadline. You don't want to be in that boat. So hopefully what we've done is given you a lot of practical, actionable advice that reflects your experience with sarcoidosis and gives you ideas to follow up on. So I wish you the best of luck, And I hope I've motivated you and encouraged you and guided you to start taking action now. Don't assume anything standard. You have to tailor everything to your experience. Sarcoidosis can disempower, any disease can disempower, but proactive planning, like we've talked about for this brief time together, can empower you. Take steps that are appropriate for you. Nothing standard. It's what works for you, and every human being is different. I wish you all good luck. Take care.
Thank you, Martin, so much for that informative session. That was fantastic. We've noticed you've changed locations, so thank you so much for
I
being
have.
with us.
Plans do not always work out as we hope.
That
So.
is right, no doubt. I'm sure our audience knows that very well. So you've been very graciously answering questions throughout the session, and I've been posting them up into the chat. And I just wanted to go ahead and invite folks to ask any additional questions. And you might notice the questions specifically about insurance types and things like that. Martin's, that's not his area of expertise. So if you have questions specific to sort of financial planning.
Yeah, health insurance. Health insurance is something that's also you really need to look into, and you want someone that's a specialist. And Medicaid planning, there were a number of questions, and I tried to give some broad guidance, but Medicaid planning in particular, you really need a lawyer, and I said that in the presentation, and it must be an attorney that specializes in Medicaid or elder law planning. It's a real specialty, and you have to use somebody in your state. The laws are very different state to state.
Great, thank you, Martin. And just thinking about sort of anticipating a question we might get here, are there any services that you are aware of that connect people with this kind of attorney? Maybe like a legal aid service or something like that?
If you're really lacking resources, you could call a local bar association. Sometimes, like for example, county or city bar associations or state bar associations have referral networks. If you have the resources to pay for the services, I think if you search online, there's a lot of online services where you can identify somebody with a specialty. But my 2 cents on that, if I were to want to hire an attorney, what I would want to do is talk to another attorney or a financial advisor or an accountant, someone that works with the attorneys, who's more likely to know who has the skill set. Because somebody that has the biggest advertisement is not necessarily the one that's best for you. It doesn't mean they're not good, but I think if you, for example, use a financial advisor, they may well know who the better attorneys are in your area. The other thing is if you belong to an organization that's local, that helps people with similar situations, they may have some recommended attorneys. Just also be careful. I always get leery of somebody who specializes in a specific narrow area. So I'm not an expert. I don't hold myself out as a specialist in planning for people with health issues or chronic disease. And I'll just be forthright. My wife was diagnosed about 16 years ago with multiple sclerosis, which is what put me on this path. And for the last 16 years, I've been writing and lecturing for all sorts of different disease organizations. And my personal goal is to create resources like I'm helping FSR with for every imaginable disease I can, because I think it helps when we speak to the specific needs that somebody has and their specific challenges. But if somebody says I'm a specialist in sarcoidosis, it doesn't even make, as an attorney, not a doctor, that's different. It doesn't make sense. If someone says they're a specialist in planning for chronic disease, it doesn't make sense. You want a good attorney, a good accountant. And like I explained in the presentation, that's the gold standard. If you can't afford it, you want to mimic that. And I tried to give you some practical advice on how to do it.
Thank you. It's been great. It was a fantastic presentation. And now that we're nearly out of time, and I just wanted to give you just a moment to be able to provide any final word to the audience or any parting advice you might have on top of all the great advice you've already given.
I've been on the same path you're all on. My wife has been struggling with MS for 16 years, so I understand it. The most important thing is you got to take action. And nobody's going to do all the things we talked about very quickly, but the presentation that I gave is things that I do, and I'm still doing it 16 years later because there's always new things to do. Just like I said, you have to revisit and update your planning. Make a commitment, even if it's an hour a month, start on the path, because if you get on that path in a year from now, you'll go, wow, look at all I've accomplished. And you'll feel good and empowered for doing that. So I encourage you to take action and wish you all good luck.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Martin. And we really want to thank you for today's session and your insightful, for all of you in the audience, your insightful questions.
Great questions, by the way. Lots of great questions.
They were, yes, thank you.
It was not a shy group.
No, that is true. We'd also like to extend our sincerest gratitude today to our expert, Martin. Thank you for sharing your expertise, your knowledge, and your valuable time and your personal connection to why this is a passionate area for you. So, Martin, thank you so much. And thank you for joining us under these circumstances. And we hope you have a great rest of your day. And really do appreciate everything. Thank you so much.
If you could circulate the article I wrote maybe to everybody.
Oh, yeah, indeed. I've already put it in the chat, actually.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so I've dropped that in the chat for everyone. And so following the session, FSR will be inviting our community to take part in a brief post-event survey to learn how FSR can provide responsive information and education to our community. Additionally, in the coming months, FSR will be sharing an educational infographic and webpage with financial resources. A link to Martin's article will be included in the chat, which is already there. And we also hope you'll check out the exhibitor hall to learn more about FSR's Global Sarcoidosis Clinic Alliance members participating in the summit this weekend. Be sure to check out the Cleveland Clinic booth to learn how they're supporting those living with sarcoidosis, and all links have been dropped into the chat. Finally, we would like to thank our sponsor, Global Genes, for their generous support of this session. Thank you all very much.
Good luck, everybody.
Thanks.